He was a young man working toward a singular goal.
He'd had a child when he was young and had given up his custody.
She was everything to him. Everything he did was to reach a goal to have a happy family.
He found a woman he believed could help make his dream a reality.
They had just gotten their first brand new house together. Both had great jobs.
But that dream would end in a deadly ambush.
6 gunshots were fired into her car, into the passenger side.
He's killed instantly, hit multiple times.
They don't know if she's gonna make it or not.
The tragedy leaves a community gripped in fear.
One neighbor had seen an individual running with a gun.
From what they could tell, it looked like it was a carjacking.
Will the investigation reveal this is more than just a deadly carjacking?
This entire story is about greed. It's about money.
They sat around a table and planned his murder.
It didn't necessarily go as well as they thought it would.
Karma. We're gonna get everybody one of these days.
At 5:30 a.m. on April 23, 2005, most people in Kansas City, Kansas are still in bed.
It was very early morning hours, still dark outside.
But in one of the city's otherwise quiet suburbs, people are not only up, they're making frantic calls to the police.
911, where's emergency?
Quite a few of the neighbors in the area say they heard what sounded like gunshots.
People were frightened. They were obviously concerned about what was going on.
The neighborhood was a fairly quiet residential neighborhood. No real note for crimes of violence or gang activity or drug activity or things like that.
By the time first responders arrive minutes later, they find neighbors beginning to gather out in the street.
People were coming outside. They wanted to see exactly what happened.
Pushing their way past the onlookers, officers find a bullet-riddled car.
It was crashed in the ditch of a neighbor's house.
Police at the scene try to keep back the growing crowd.
It occurred not far at all from their house, probably within a block of where they lived.
Inside the car, first responders find a man and a woman, both covered in blood.
Neither party was responsive.
The man in the passenger seat had been shot multiple times.
Got no pulse over here. This guy's deceased.
It was clear to them right off the bat that he hadn't made it.
Neighbors identify the victim as 29-year-old Jeremy Warrior, and the woman in the driver's seat is his wife, Alicia.
While Alicia did survive her bullet wounds, it was very clear that she needed significant medical treatment.
EMTs arrive and work to transport the driver to the hospital. But what happened to these 2 residents is still a mystery.
The police don't know if this is a result of some random drive-by shooting. They don't know if it's a random burglary gone wrong.
They just couldn't figure out why they were a part of such a violent crime.
Easygoing and affable, Jeremy Warrior never had trouble winning people over.
Jeremy was outgoing, had a lot of friends.
Jeremy was just always a real nice guy, always smiling, easy to get along with.
Just everybody liked him. He's just, you don't meet guys like him every day. And you'd like to think you could, but you don't. Very likable guy.
Jeremy's high school sweetheart, Jessa Wilson, was cut from a similar cloth.
They had known each other a long time, and they ended up falling in love as teenagers.
That love was put to the test in 1996, when Jessa gave birth to the couple's daughter, Alice.
Jeremy was real excited about being a father.
And though he desperately wanted to make a family one day, it seemed Jessa wasn't the one.
Well, I'm out of here.
Wait, what?
What I heard from Jeremy is that she was kind of jealous.
Where are you going?
I told you about this. It's my cousin's birthday party. Everybody's waiting for me.
No, like hell you do. You need to be here with me and the baby. We just got the baby down.
He was a guy's guy. He had a lot of friends. He liked to be out and about. And Jessa, on the other hand, she kind of wanted him all to herself.
Jeremy.
Jeremy ultimately broke things off with Jessa, and they both decided it would be best for their daughter to live with her paternal grandmother for a while.
They didn't get along too well at the end, and that's why I think they decided to let The grandmother have custody of the daughter.
They weren't able to provide and care for the child like they needed to.
Still, Jeremy remained close to his daughter and knew that once he started bringing in a steady income, she could live with him full time.
He knew what it was going to take to get there, one step at a time. Everything he did was to reach a goal to have a happy family.
By 2001, Jeremy seemed to have his life back on track and hoped he would be reunited with his daughter in just a couple months. Around that same time, Jeremy met 24-year-old Alicia Southern.
During that time, he was working at a factory that made heating and cooling equipment.
She had a job there, and that's where the two of them met.
She was working in the area where he was working. They struck up a conversation, hit it off.
Their chemistry was undeniable.
They built up a friendship and then gradually a flirtation.
And it wasn't long before their passion ignited. When the couple made their relationship official, it was clear to Jeremy's friends and family that things were getting serious.
He talked about her all the time. He thought the world of her.
And while Jeremy was all in, Alicia was hesitant to allow herself to love again.
There was some abuse in her past, so she had a lot that she struggled with.
None of her past boyfriends were providers. They always ended up taking from her, leaving her broken.
But to Alicia, Jeremy was different.
If you needed anything, he would throw down what he was doing and come help you.
He was very hardworking.
When he did something, it was 100%. Damn good guy.
Within a few months of meeting, Jeremy and Alicia moved in together.
They seemed to be hitting it off pretty good because after that, about a year later, they got married.
It was beautiful. And over at church in Kansas City, Kansas, packed. I mean, he had a lot of friends.
Jeremy was very excited when he got married, you know, so. And I was excited for him. He asked me to be the best man at his wedding, and I was.
After tying the knot, the newlyweds wasted no time building a life together.
After they got married, he applied for a house, got approved, got his first house.
That was one of his goals, to get a house. He got it under a first-time home buyer's plan.
In addition to their new house, Jeremy and Alicia also embarked on new careers.
She went to work for this insurance company.
Jeremy was a truck driver at a cement company.
They really loved him there.
He was going to really go places with the company.
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, babe, you're a lifesaver.
With new jobs and a new home, Jeremy and Alicia quickly settled into a comfortable suburban existence.
They like to have company over and play cards, play dominoes, just family stuff.
It was just the American dream. You meet someone, you fall in love, you move from an apartment to your very own first house, and things were looking up.
However, there was still one thing missing.
Oh, well, I'll be picking up Alice.
Oh, great. Well, I'll make something special for dinner.
He had been talking about wanting to have his daughter come live with them and start more of a traditional family setting with Alicia.
But on April 23rd, 2005, Jeremy and Alicia's dream turns into a nightmare.
They were the target of a shooting.
When the first responders arrived, they determined that Jeremy was dead at the scene.
Alicia was hurt pretty bad.
They don't know if she's gonna make it or not.
After 3 years of marriage, it appeared that Jeremy and Alicia Warrior had found their happily ever after.
They seemed to have it all. They both had 2 really good jobs. They had just gotten their new dream house. They looked like the perfect family.
But on April 23rd, 2005, after neighbors report gunshots to 911, first responders find the couple's car crashed into a ditch barely a block from their home.
Jeremy, he was dead in the passenger seat.
Alicia was taken by ambulance to the hospital. Her injuries were very serious.
It was very clear that she needed significant medical treatment or she wasn't gonna make it.
As day breaks, detectives arrive and begin their investigation by processing the crime scene.
The vehicle was located basically in what I would call the median grassy area.
It all appeared like the vehicle had been ambushed and the shots were fired, and that caused her to lose control of the vehicle, steering it into the ditch on the side of the road.
Looking inside the car, detectives are immediately able to determine a few things about the crime.
There weren't any shell casings inside the car or on the ground outside.
Since there were no shell casings found, we believe we were dealing with a revolver.
Detectives don't find any signs of a robbery either.
It didn't appear that anybody had tried to take anything from the vehicle. In fact, Alicia's phone was right there in the armrest.
It's not a robbery.
It looked like it could have been an attempted carjacking.
Maybe the killer was trying to get Alicia and Jeremy out of the car and something went wrong.
Carjackings can happen anywhere, but it was somewhat unusual that somebody would drive up into that neighborhood at that time of the morning, hoping to carjack somebody.
However, there is one thing about the car that puzzles detectives.
Windows rolled down halfway.
Like he knew the shooter?
Maybe.
The fact that the window on Jeremy's side was down and so far down was somewhat odd because it was an unseasonably cold morning that morning. There was no real damage to the outside of the vehicle. It would have appeared that the shooter was standing, if not with his arm in the vehicle, very close to the vehicle.
Damage inside the car also suggests that the shots had all come through Jeremy's open window.
So as investigators were on the scene trying to figure out what happened, they noticed that all 6 of these shots were fired into the passenger side.
There was a gunshot through the passenger side window, which went through the right side of the driver's headrest and then came out on the back of the driver's side headrest. The investigators also found 2 bullets outside of the vehicle that had exited through the back door on the driver's side of the car.
The trajectory of the bullets would have placed the shooter on the passenger side, aiming into the passenger compartment in a downward diagonal fashion.
For detectives, the fact that the shots all came from the passenger side argues against a carjacking.
It didn't make much sense that somebody would run up to the passenger to try to carjack a car. Ordinarily, the person with the firearm would be attempting to get the driver out of the vehicle.
Police really think that Jeremy was the target.
But if Jeremy was specifically targeted for murder, who pulled the trigger and why?
Let's go talk to the neighbors, see what they know.
Detectives hope one of the onlookers at the scene may have witnessed the shooting.
They may have heard the shots, but nobody necessarily described seeing the actual shots. It was still dark out when the incident occurred.
However, one neighbor states he arrived on the scene just moments after the attack.
I was in my garage warming up the car and I heard shots and I just came out.
It doesn't matter if gunshots happen frequently or not. Whenever you hear gunshots, you're automatically jumping up to see what happened.
The neighbor told detectives that when he ran outside, he saw the Warriors' car behind an SUV that was stopped in the street.
Well, there was an SUV right in front.
He described seeing the SUV rolling forward and then seeing somebody run, catch up to the SUV, get into the passenger side and leave. And that becomes important because then we know that there's at least 2 people that are involved.
All right, thank you. We'll be in touch.
With the crime looking more and more like a targeted assassination, detectives wonder if Jeremy may have been engaged in some unsavory behavior.
When you're dealing with a hit like this, typically gangs or drugs are involved.
Detectives head back to the station, hoping to dig up more information about Jeremy's private life. But just as they begin their search, Jeremy's Uncle Johnny comes in, desperate to know what's happened to his nephew.
I had the TV on and I see this murder, so I ran over there.
Mr. Bassett, I hate to tell you this, but your nephew Jeremy's dead.
Oh my God. What about Alicia?
We're not sure yet.
The detective, we just talked and he kind of calmed me down a little bit.
Alicia was in intensive care.
Do you know who could have done this? Was Jeremy involved in any drugs or anything like that?
No, not Jeremy.
Jeremy never had any drug charges or nothing like that.
Had he ever done any time?
Yeah, but it's complicated.
Tell us about it.
Jeremy's uncle tells detectives that in 1998, Jeremy had gotten into a heated altercation with Jessa Wilson, his ex-girlfriend, and the mother of his daughter.
She was kind of a jealous person and he didn't want to be with her no more, but she wanted to be with him and she was determined that she was going to do what she wanted to do and kept bothering him.
He was told me he was laying in bed one night. Next thing you know, his door gets kicked in.
So you just gonna ignore me now?
They were tussling back and forth trying to get a gun from one another.
It accidentally went off and it shot her in the foot.
Jessa's injuries were minor, but the outcome for Jeremy wasn't.
It was initially charged with aggravated battery.
Ultimately, Jeremy served more than a year in prison for the crime. But his uncle says that time behind bars made Jeremy more mature.
Being in prison, I think, made Jeremy a more stronger person. He had more of a determination on being the right person, doing the right thing.
He had moved on and gotten a job and was trying to provide for his new wife as well as his daughter.
Did Jessa and Alicia get along?
Nah, Jess was pretty jealous.
She wanted him to be with her. She didn't want him to be with anyone else.
With the evidence at the scene seeming to suggest Jeremy had stopped to talk to his would-be assassin, detectives can't help but wonder if Jessa Wilson may be involved.
Because of their rocky relationship with one another, she was the perfect target for police to start.
This murder could easily be a case of if I can't have him, no one will.
Less than 24 hours after an apparent ambush left Jeremy Warrior dead and his wife Alicia in the ICU, Kansas City, Kansas detectives have identified a person of interest, Jeremy's ex-girlfriend, Jessa Wilson.
They had a very volatile relationship.
There was an incident at his apartment with a gun.
Jeremy attempted to take it away from her, and he ended up accidentally shooting her.
It seemed like Jeremy had put the incident behind him.
But detectives wonder, had Jessa? That afternoon, they bring her in for questioning.
You think I had something to do with this?
It's what we're trying to rule out.
I was nowhere near Jeremy's last night. I worked third shift. You can ask my supervisor.
She had an airtight alibi. She wasn't in the area at that time.
So are we finished here?
With no evidence tying Jessa to the shootings, detectives have little choice but to let her go. Luckily, 36 hours after the shootings, detectives are finally able to talk with someone who may have the answers they need.
Alicia did survive her bullet wounds.
Once she was stabilized, the detectives were able to speak with her. But she's still under the effects of this trauma, and she was very upset finding out Jeremy died.
Jeremy's death isn't the only devastating news.
Though she sustained only one bullet wound, it caused so much damage to her spinal cord.
As a result of her injury, she was paralyzed from the waist down.
She'll never be able to walk again. She has a vacuum pump in her stomach, which pumps medicine to her spine 24 hours a day.
Given Alicia's fragile condition, detectives tread carefully.
I know this is really difficult right now, but is there anything you can tell us that might help us solve this?
I don't know.
She obviously was traumatized. She had just found out that she was going to be paralyzed for life.
However, she's determined to tell detectives her story.
Well, she indicated she wanted to cooperate.
Can you remember anything?
Where should I start?
The night before the shooting, what were you and Jeremy doing?
I was at my friend Nina's house.
She also mentioned that there were two individuals there by the name of Jamar Moore and Darrell Rogers.
Jeremy wasn't with you?
He was at home.
What time did you get home?
Alicia told the officers that she left Nina's around 1 a.m. and that she also called her husband Jeremy to let him know she was on her way home.
And when you got there, was he awake?
We talked for a little bit, but then we went to bed because I had to take him to work at 5:30.
He had a taillight that was out, so that's why she was driving him to work that day.
Tell us what happened when you took him to work.
She was going to take him to work that morning, and then she was going to take the car in to have repair work done.
Alicia says that nothing seemed out of the ordinary on the morning of the shooting, until she turned onto the road leading out of their neighborhood.
I turned the corner and there was an SUV sitting in the street.
Like just parked there?
Yeah. But the engine was still running.
She explains that she stopped behind the SUV so she wouldn't hit that vehicle.
Then what happened?
She told them two Hispanic men, short in nature, about late 20s, early 30s, had jumped out of both the back seat doors of that SUV and ran towards her car.
The window was down on Jeremy's side because Jeremy was hot. Jeremy said something like, "What the hell?"
Do you remember the gunshots?
Just one. Everything got fuzzy after that.
She felt pain and a floating sensation.
She really didn't know what happened next.
She woke up in the hospital.
Alicia's account largely agrees with what her neighbor saw after the shooting, except for one significant detail.
Alicia described seeing 2 shooters exit the SUV, but the neighbor only reported 1.
However, detectives figure there's an easy explanation for the discrepancy.
Alicia was still very much in pain. She was a little disoriented.
She was on so many different medications for the pain.
She obviously was traumatized. Perhaps things were confused.
Is Jeremy involved in anything that could have led to this?
They asked if there was anything going on in her or Jeremy's life that could have given rise to something like this, any illegal activity, any outside romantic interest.
No, nothing like that.
She does not have any clue why they would have been victimized like this.
Neither she nor Jeremy would have brought this upon themselves.
She says they don't have any problems, they're doing great.
Alicia's statement offers detectives little to work with. But when they receive the results of Jeremy's autopsy on April 26th, it does shed some additional light on the attack.
2 .38 caliber slugs were recovered from the body.
There were no shell casings at the scene, so the murder weapon had to be a .38 caliber revolver.
You could tell that at some point that he was struggling with the assailant because he had a bullet wound to his hand.
After reading the coroner's report, detectives turned back to Jeremy's uncle, Johnny Bassett, hoping to learn more about their victim. Now that the shock of losing his nephew is beginning to fade, Johnny is able to relay some new and eye-opening information about Jeremy and Alicia's relationship.
Can you tell us about Jeremy and Alicia?
Do you know if they had any problems or anything?
Detectives first started to learn about there being some issues in the marriage from Jeremy's uncle. There was some turmoil in the relationship.
It wasn't all perfect and wonderful.
Alicia was starting to stay out late. She wasn't answering her phone. They started to argue more.
He started to believe that Alicia may have had something going on the side.
They started to have problems. He got pretty suspicious.
Hey, baby.
Where you been?
I had to work late.
He would call her just to see where she's at, and she would ignore his calls.
I said, well, do you think she's cheating on you or something? And he kind of gave me a little laugh like, huh? And I knew that meant yes, but he never did say yes.
But Jeremy's uncle tells detectives, eventually his nephew decided to do something about the situation.
And I told him, well, what you gonna do? He said, well, I think I'm gonna get a divorce.
Jeremy's uncle says that Alicia knew about his decision too.
Jeremy had told Alicia he wanted a divorce.
I want out.
No.
And they were fussed a little bit about it.
I can't believe you're doing this to our family.
Jeremy, stop it.
And then all of a sudden she just said, yeah, I guess you're right. I should be at home. I shouldn't be staying out all night.
I'm sorry.
According to Jeremy's uncle, Alicia's sudden change of heart led to a reconciliation.
We gave her a trial period. He told me, he says, I'm gonna give her a couple of weeks to see how she did. And she did okay. And that's the last I heard about it.
But now detectives can't help but wonder, had Alicia's decision to come back to Jeremy caused her to lose him for good?
If Alicia had dumped her boyfriend for Jeremy, that would give him a motive for murder.
Jealousy can bring out the absolute worst in someone, make you do things you'd never think you'd do.
Detectives investigating the shooting death of 29-year-old Jeremy Warrior have just learned his relationship with wife Alicia wasn't quite as happy as she'd led detectives to believe.
I want a divorce.
He was not, in fact, happy with their marriage. He didn't suspect her of having an affair.
But did Alicia's alleged infidelity have something to do with Jeremy's death? Given her injuries, detectives are reluctant to confront Alicia directly about the supposed affair.
You're looking at somebody that is paralyzed from the waist down as a result of the shooting.
Instead of confronting Alicia directly, detectives obtain a search warrant for her phone records.
They were able to see that there was this unknown number showing up on her phone within minutes of Jeremy's murder.
Upon looking up who the owner of that phone number was, investigators discovered that it belongs to a Darrell Rogers.
That name jumped out to detectives because Darrell was one of the people that Alicia said she had been hanging out with prior to the murder.
A quick records check reveals Darrell Rogers' past isn't exactly squeaky clean.
He is somebody that's gotten into trouble before. Darrell was on federal probation over a gun charge.
Could Darrell Rogers be the third person in this love triangle? After a little digging, detectives uncover further evidence that suggests he was more than just friends with Alicia.
Between February 1st to April 23rd, 2005, there had been 52 phone calls from Darrell to Alicia.
Many of these calls were made between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. So detectives decide to visit the insurance company where Alicia works.
A coworker of Alicia's indicated that there was another individual who wasn't Jeremy that was coming by Alicia's work.
Did you know his name?
No, I didn't talk to him.
You mind if I show you a picture, see if you recognize him?
Okay.
Is this the guy?
That's the guy. That's Alicia's friend.
He would either come to Alicia's work and get her car, or he would drop her off and take her car, and then he would have her car throughout the day, driving around, doing whatever that he was doing, and then he would come back and give her her car, and then she would go home.
At this point, investigators are pretty sure that there was something going on with Darrell and Alicia.
They felt fairly confident that they had just identified the prime suspect in Jeremy's murder.
However, based on what Jeremy and Alicia's neighbors saw after the shooting, detectives aren't looking for a single suspect.
There was two people. There's somebody driving the SUV and then somebody getting into the passenger side.
It just so happened that in addition to Darrell, Alicia mentioned hanging out with a man named Jamar Moore on the night before Jeremy's murder.
Detectives put out a bolo for both men and find Jamar Moore first.
Jamar was a friend of Darrell's, had been a friend for a while.
Jamar Moore was supposed to be Jarrell's, brother, or Jarrell's supposed to be like a mentor to him.
He tells investigators that he's been friends with Darrell for 8 or 9 years, but did not meet Alicia until February of 2005.
So you just knew her through Darrell?
Yeah.
Were they hooking up?
Alicia and Darrell? Nah.
He said that he did see them together a lot, but that he'd never seen them engage in any romantic interactions and thought they were just friends.
Did Darrell ever seem jealous of Alicia's husband?
No, not that I saw.
Did he ever say anything about hurting Alicia or Mr. Warrior?
Why you asking?
Because we think Darrell killed him.
No, Darrell didn't do it. Shiloh did.
Jamar indicated that there was another person involved named Shiloh Campbell.
Jamar said he knew this because Shiloh and Darrell and himself, they were all hanging out, and Shiloh had said that he actually committed the murder.
He wasn't able to give a lot of detail about why that would be, but he indicated that Shiloh Campbell had confessed to doing this.
Jamar says that Shiloh was this rough guy.
Shiloh was kind of a bad dude. He had a record and a reputation.
So it didn't surprise him that he would do something like this.
Armed with this information, detectives track down Shiloh Campbell at his apartment and bring him in for questioning.
So what the hell is this about? I'm gonna just cut to the chase here. Your pal Jamar Moore says you killed Jeremy Warrior.
No way. I didn't kill nobody, man. I don't even know that dude.
So why would Jamar say you did it?
I don't know. Dude is crazy or something.
They did investigate Shiloh and determined that that person was not involved.
They were able to clear him. He was not a part of this crime.
It appeared that was just something that Jamar came up with on the fly. Shiloh Campbell didn't really help him at all.
It was really just to divert attention from himself.
Instead, it backfired.
It just makes you look more guilty if you're going to make up a lie like that.
To detectives, it's increasingly clear that Jamar Moore and Darrell Rogers were involved in Jeremy's murder. However, one question remains unanswered.
If Darrell and Jamar were involved, wouldn't Alicia be able to identify them?
On May 5th, 2005, detectives finally confront Alicia about her alleged affair with Darrell Rogers.
The police told her that they didn't want to embarrass her or anything, but they gave her information that had suggested that she and Darrell may have been having an affair.
They said, you need to come clean with us because if this other person's involved or if somebody that knows him is involved, it could help us solve this crime.
I've got your phone records, and I talked to your coworkers, and we know all about Darrell.
It was just a fling.
She had to come clean at that point, and that's when she told detectives that she was having an affair with Darrell.
Alicia met Darrell at a party, and he is a real character. He carries himself very confidently.
Darrell came off as a little bit of a bad boy. He had a little bit of an edge to him, and she found that attractive.
Look, if you're free this weekend, you think I can take you out?
You know I'm married, right?
Is that gonna be a problem?
No.
Alicia told them that it was a distraction from her normal, boring life, and that's why she started having a relationship with Darrell.
But Alicia says that after several months, Darrell began to show a different, more dangerous side.
It's Jeremy.
Darrell would get very angry when they were together and her husband tried to reach her.
Put it away. It would happen frequently that when she was staying out, that Jeremy would try to call and make contact with her to find out where she was.
And at one occasion, about a month before the murder, he had actually gotten so mad that her husband was calling her.
Why does he keep calling your phone?
That he actually broke her phone.
Have you lost your damn mind?
Have you lost yours?
According to Alicia, that's when she realized she had made a terrible mistake.
Alicia had indicated that she was going to call things off with Darrell, that she loved Jeremy.
But did Darrell Rogers have other plans?
She may not have been serious about Darrell, but he was definitely serious about her.
Darrell was never one to bow out without a fight.
May 5th, 2005. It's been almost 2 weeks since an early morning shooting left Jeremy Warrior dead and his wife Alicia paralyzed. But detectives interviewing Alicia have just made a breakthrough in their investigation.
Alicia admits to the officers that she was having an affair with Darrell Rogers.
Darrell had a bit of a rough past and started to do things that scared Alicia.
Do you understand me? Do you?
He was possessive and controlling.
And according to Alicia, when she tried to call it off with Darrell, he'd made it clear he wasn't going to let her go.
Alicia was afraid for her life.
That's when Alicia makes a shocking confession.
It was at that point that she said that Darrell Rogers is the one that shot Jeremy.
But if Darrell had shot Alicia and her husband in a jealous rage, why had she gone to such lengths to cover for him?
According to Alicia, it was because she was terrified of Darrell.
He came up here and threatened me.
Alicia told the officers that Darrell had called her at the hospital and visited. He told her he's sorry he shot her, he didn't mean to, and not to talk to the police.
A quick check of the hospital's visitor log confirms that Alicia is telling the truth.
It was determined that Darrell had actually been to the hospital to visit Alicia at one point.
Detectives immediately transfer Alicia to a new room.
She was being guarded because she knew who did it, to keep them away from her.
Based on Alicia's statement, detectives issue an arrest warrant for Darrell Rogers.
Charges were filed against Darrell Rogers for first-degree murder of Jeremy Warrior.
But any charges against Jamar Moore will have to wait.
Law enforcement was suspicious of Jamar's involvement, but at that point, there just wasn't enough to make an arrest.
Though police have been unable to locate Darrell Rogers since the shooting, they finally bring him into custody on May 13th.
Darrell was discovered in a halfway house in the area, and he was arrested on the spot.
Jeremy's family is grateful to learn his likely killer is behind bars. But the news also leaves them angry with Alicia.
I always blamed her because if it wasn't for her, Darrell would have never knew Jeremy.
In July of 2005, with Darrell's preliminary hearing fast approaching, Alicia deals the case against Darrell a major setback.
Alicia recanted her statement as Darrell being the shooter.
She said that she had been pressured to make that statement.
She reverts back to her original statement that the perpetrator was Hispanic.
She's the only one that can identify the shooter, and she's the only one that can provide the motive for why this happened.
But why would Alicia suddenly back out? Had Darrell or one of his associates gotten to her somehow?
Perhaps he did threaten her, that if she continued with it, that he might hurt her.
Whatever her reasons, without Alicia's testimony, the prosecutor's case against Darrell Rogers collapses.
They didn't have enough evidence to bring it against him. When she recanted, they no longer have any witnesses. They don't have any real evidence against him.
We dismissed the case because it didn't make sense to try to force that case to trial at that point.
Darrell is released, but as far as prosecutors are concerned, the case against him is still ongoing.
It was pretty frustrating, but there is no statute of limitations on a murder in Kansas, so it warranted more investigation.
As detectives dig deeper into the case, they make another shocking discovery, but not about Darrell, about Jeremy's widow and one-time star witness, Alicia.
We didn't have any reason to suspect her initially.
But now it appears that there is much more to the story.
It came to light that there was quite a bit of insurance money that Alicia stood to gain from Jeremy's death.
She eventually ended up getting a payout of $275,000 from these policies.
She received her payment, then she had her attorney call us and say that she could no longer testify. That's when the suspicions really ratcheted up a notch about Alicia.
For the next several months, detectives keep tabs on Alicia. During that time, their suspicion of her only deepens.
She was still in contact with Darrell. They were living together. They were spending all this money together, that she had bought him vehicles.
For police and prosecutors, the implications are clear.
At that point, you have to start looking at her like she has some more involvement than what she's led everyone to believe.
But as damning as it all looks, is it enough to convince a jury that Darrell and Alicia were involved in Jeremy's murder?
The shooting had left her paralyzed, so she appeared to be just as much a victim as Jeremy was.
There wasn't really anything there tying Alicia to the actual murder.
They knew Alicia and Darrell's relationship was suspicious. They also suspected Jamar Moore may somehow be involved since he'd lied to police about another man shooting Jeremy.
The problem was they didn't have any actual evidence proving any of them were responsible.
With all three of the alleged conspirators refusing to cooperate, the investigation remains stalled. But Jeremy's family continues to push for justice.
And I do credit Jeremy's family because they would come in every once in a while and ask, you know, what are the updates, what's going on?
They were being relentless. They weren't gonna let him shut the case down.
I wanted Jarrell bad, the one who shot him, but I wanted her worse than that because she's the one that did this.
Prosecutors are just as convinced.
The case obviously had been solved. It was just a matter of getting together enough evidence to prove it to a jury.
3 years pass, and no new evidence comes to light. Prosecutors now face a tough choice.
You look at what you have and decide whether or not it's worth going forward. The detective and I were like, well, we think we've got a case. Let us go to the grand jury.
They had a feeling that once indictments started flying, that one of the conspirators would flip and turn on the others in hopes of cutting a deal.
In late April 2008, prosecutors cleared the first hurdle.
The grand jury returned indictments on Darrell and Alicia and Jamar for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder.
But it's what Darrell, Alicia, and Jamar do next that will determine if the prosecutor's gamble pays off.
After the three were arrested, they knew that they were facing some pretty big charges.
The prosecution needed them to turn on each other.
They weren't going to get justice until one of them cracked.
In May of 2008, paraplegic widow Alicia Warrior sits in jail, charged with the 2005 murder of her husband, Jeremy.
We finally got an arrest. I was just so excited they got her.
Alicia's lover, Darrell Rogers, and their suspected accomplice, Jamar Moore, have also been charged with the murder.
Police and prosecutors were hoping that one of them would flip and implicate the others.
However, Alicia and Darrell refused to play ball.
Detectives did approach Alicia about giving a statement. Basically, she just said she didn't have anything to say, and that was the end of that.
He had already been charged 3 years before, and the charges were dismissed. So he really thought that he was gonna beat this.
But it's Jamar Moore, the suspected getaway driver, who proves to be the weakest link.
I'm not going down for a murder I didn't do.
So tell us what happened.
In his statement, Jamar claims that killing Jeremy was originally Alicia's idea.
Jamar indicated in his statement that Alicia had approached him about killing somebody to make some money.
We all met the night before.
Darrell volunteered to be the shooter. Jamar agreed to be the driver.
But Jamar tells detectives that he didn't know the target's identity until the night of the murder.
A few hours before the actual shooting, that's when they told him it was Alicia's husband. The original plan was to shoot Jeremy, shoot Alicia in the leg to make it seem like it was real, and then steal some things from the car.
Jamar says Alicia stopped her vehicle as planned. But once Darrell approached the passenger side window with a gun, things quickly went wrong.
The fact that Jeremy struggled probably caused some panic, caused them to fire all the rounds, caused her to be shot sooner than the plan would have entailed.
Of course, she didn't set it up that she was going to get paralyzed.
Alicia gonna be okay?
I think she's dead.
What?
Look, just go. Go, 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 go!
We panicked and just sped off.
Is Jamar telling the truth? Another look at the physical evidence suggests he is.
He was able to give some fairly specific details about how things happened, and he described the gun as a .38 revolver.
.38 caliber slugs had been recovered during Jeremy's autopsy.
He never indicated where the murder weapon was or gave us any indication where we could find it.
So they were pretty confident that he was telling the truth.
So confident that prosecutors cut Jamar a substantial deal in exchange for his testimony.
His charges were reduced down to a lower level offense, and he was sentenced to a term of 3 years.
And when Alicia Warrior stands trial in September 2008, Jamar is the prosecution's star witness.
His testimony was very important. He laid out the timeline, he put all the main characters together.
Alicia's attorneys counter with a compelling witness of their own, one who just might win sympathy from the jury.
When Alicia testified, she presented herself as a victim. Why would she set herself up to be shot? Which is pretty powerful when you're looking at somebody that is paralyzed from the waist down as a result.
On cross-examination, prosecutors tread lightly.
These jurors, they're only sitting here for 4 or 5 days, and I wanted to be sure that I wasn't coming off as overly aggressive.
Instead, the prosecution counters Alicia's powerful testimony by playing back tapes of her previous, shifting statements about the shooting.
First, she said it was 2 shooters. Then she went to say it was 1 and that it was Darrell. Then she went back to insisting that it was 2 shooters.
It was pretty obvious she was trying to hide something.
But will it be enough to convince the jury?
Alicia was found guilty of all charges.
I had confidence they was gonna get her, and they did. And they came back with it. I was just so happy.
Alicia sits stone-faced as the verdict is read, but breaks down completely when the judge sets the terms of her punishment.
Alicia is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole until 50 years.
They gave her the time, and that's when she was crying, and I didn't do it, and they didn't do it.
Darrell Rogers sees the writing on the wall and pleads guilty to murder in exchange for a 20-year sentence.
After seeing what Alicia got, he wasn't willing to roll the dice at trial.
And though the case is closed, there are still lingering questions that will never be answered.
It's still hard to wrap my head around the idea that somebody would agree to be shot.
She expected she'd have a little wound and she'd have a lot of money.
It was karma. She had what was coming to her.
But even justice can't fill the hole left behind by Jeremy Warrior's passing.
It's sad he's gone there alive, but I also think that he's in a lot better place.
I think today he would like to be remembered as a good father, I think about Jeremy and what he did and how he was, and it just kind of cheers me up a little bit. I do feel his spirit, yeah. And I just feel that every day.